So first things first, Anne, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, that's good to hear. So where I would like to start is actually with a line from Missionary Man. If I had a dollar bill for all the things I've done, there'd be amount of money piled up to my chin, which is
Yeah.
obviously a very apt lyric for you, you yourself as well. The
Yes.
last years have been moments of reflection for a lot of people. So what have the last 2 years been like for you? Did you reflect a lot?
Yes. I think the last 2 years have been, for me, probably like they are for so many people, um, uh, in that suddenly normal life is disrupted and you're not out and about with all the people and all the input like usual, like before. So you become more inward and you have time to think and read and do things and write that you didn't have before. So that's the good part of it, you know. I did miss going out and being social.
Mm.
You know, we're a social species, and that's why it's been hard for so many people, and me too. But the good part is that I got all these songs out of it. I wrote a bunch of songs, and it was time to go and make a record. And I never have had much luck with the sending computer files to different musicians and having them record at home and sending them back to me. I never have really felt the spark in that, you know. So my husband and my manager and I went down to Muscle Shoals with masks on and everything, and vaccinations and all that. And we got together with some musicians down at Muscle Shoals, and who turned out now to be my band. And we made this record, which is now just about to come out.
Muscle Shoals, so that I'm sure you know about the documentary, which is one of my favorites. And but this is not the one in Alabama, right?
No, this is the one in
Oh,
Alabama.
it is the one in Alabama. So
Yeah.
maybe since you've been there, you can kind of enlighten me. What is it like there? What is the atmosphere like? What are the musicians like?
Oh, well, it's very humble and unassuming.
Mm.
It's a small little place that's really funky, and you can tell it's time tested, and
Mm.
there's really good vibes in there, and it's had a history of so many hits being made there that you sort of feel it when you go in there, and the people are really warm and great. They're Southerners, you know, so there's this sort of exaggerated warmth and welcoming and hi y'all, you know. And so that was the atmosphere there, and it turned out to be magic. It just
Okay.
really did.
And you've released two solo albums previously, which were full of covers. So this
Yep.
time around, what brought you to Muscle Shoals, and what kind of made that happen, that you went down there to work with these musicians and to make something new?
Well, it's just, it was time to not do an album of covers. I just,
Mm.
because I've been songwriting during quarantine, I had all these new songs, and it was great for me because I got to tell my own stories, you know. And so there are 11 songs on the record, and 7 of them are new
Mhm.
originals. The other 4 are just cover songs that I just love, that I couldn't rest until I got to sing, you know, like Missionary Man and Forget Her and Bridge of Sighs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you started writing yourself, and obviously you've been writing for a long time, writing songs for a long time, uh, what did you notice about writing those songs, those 7 songs that were yours? Has your process changed at all over the past couple of decades?
Yeah, it has. I've never written like I wrote on Fierce Bliss.
Okay.
I And the main thing is that there was nobody to tell me anything except myself. You know, I mean, the buck stopped with me. So I got to write about the things that I find exciting and interesting, and things from my own life. Yeah, it was really a great experience, kind of like a soul purge.
Okay. What was the first song that rolled out that eventually ended up on the album?
I think the first one we recorded. Do you mean the first one I wrote or the first one we recorded?
Either doesn't. Well, I was thinking the one you wrote first for this album, but
Yeah, the one I wrote first was called "Fighten for Life,"
okay.
and that was written back in 2016, and I released a demo of that. Excuse me, on an EP back then, but I really wanted to develop it into a full production, you know. So we did that first at Muscle Shoals, and then after that we worked on As the World Turns, and you know, we just started knocking them down.
But it's interesting because you mentioned it almost being like a purge of sorts, and then fighting for life is obviously very, very big statement in that. And then you mentioned As the World Turns as well, and there's a line in there: "Here's my here's my heart, believe that it's true." So this sense. Well, what mindset were they written with? What were you going through at the time?
I think my mindset was just, I wanted to reach into my emotions and my experiences in life at the moment and pull out anecdotes. And so, especially As the World Turns, and that one in particular, it's just great because I had license to go in and just write about my own life, which is, you know, endlessly interesting for me.
That's interesting because that's kind of the I don't know if paradox is the right word, but the thing with being a band versus solo. In a band, there's always four captains on one ship, and then when you're solo, as you mentioned, the buck stops with you. So you have all this creative freedom. Yeah, but what for you were the biggest differences in terms of writing for, say, Heart and now writing for yourself?
Oh, I think the biggest difference was that when I'm writing for myself, there are no expectations. When you write for Heart, it's more like you're playing against heart hits like Barracuda and Crazy on You and, you know, Alone and These Dreams and all that. And there are expectations of what, you know, Heart is supposed to sound like. But for me on a solo album, it's no holds barred.
What were the things, and maybe this is too abstract or anything, but what were the things that you were allowed to do now that perhaps you couldn't for Heart? Is it in terms of musical direction? Is it in terms of, as you mentioned, kind of focusing lyrically on yourself?
Let's see. Yeah, I think so. I mean, just my own emotions, and I think while I did focus on my own life and my own emotions, I still wanted the songs to be universal. Like people could take them and make them mean whatever they wanted to for their own lives, you know.
For you as well, you mentioned kind of the expectations, and was that difficult then? And I can imagine that happened after the first album, because you were so successful, especially early on in your career. Did that kind of follow you, or were you? How would you put that? Did it weigh you down a little bit, those expectations?
Yeah, I think there were times when it did. I wouldn't say it did on the whole, but we've written so many songs over the decades, and people are always comparing whatever songs we write or I write to those first songs. I mean, that's just human nature. The first thing you hear, and see is what you remember, and so yeah, it was nice to be free of that for a moment.
When you started, you mentioned going down to Muscle Shoals and working with these people. And then how did the kind of the people that you started working with, including people like Warren Haynes, how did that start to shape itself? Did it all come natural? Did you seek out people?
It came natural. I have known Warren Haynes for about 5 years now,
Okay.
and he had asked me to come sit in with Government Mule live about 3 or 4 times. So I knew him and I knew that band, and so it was real easy and natural to write with Warren on Gladiator and Angels Blues. And then when I asked him if it was okay for me to put these songs we wrote together on my record, he was just fine with it. He's just a great person and very generous. And then Kenny Wayne Shepherd, who came to play on Bridge of Sighs and Missionary Man, was the same way. I mean, he was just so into it, and he gave so much of himself. And especially on Bridge of Sighs, I thought Kenny came in and just nailed it. He is a young guy, so he was probably a child when Robin Trower's version came out back in the late 70s. But he heard that song as a real classic and he wanted to outdo the original. Okay. So he came in and he just let it go. It's so beautiful the way he does that song.
When it comes to your vocals, and not particularly on that song, but when your vocals, do you have some competitiveness with yourself in your vocals as well?
Oh, always. Yeah. I set the bar for myself really high vocally. And it's just, if I'm not present and authentic and real, I get mad at myself if I ever feel myself phoning it in, and not being real about it. But yeah, and also because so many of the early Heart songs were recorded when I was, 25 years old or 24 years old, and my voice was higher then. So it's a challenge now to sing in those original keys, but I still do it because it matters to me that those songs sound the way they always have,
Right, but I suppose that takes a lot of commitment to taking care of your voice and to make sure that you're still able to do it, because not a lot of artists can still do so after a certain amount of time. So I'm not going to ask you about the secret, but what do you put in to kind of make sure you are able to sing those songs?
Well, I take arnica, which is an herb which helps with swelling and bruising of the skin, but I take it like in mega doses, and it tends to let my throat just heal up and the swelling go away. So I can sing a whole rock set, and then the next night I can do it. Do it again. Yeah.
Okay. So. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned Angel Blues, and that is one of my favorites on the record. What was the starting point for that song?
I just wanted to write a blues song that had a different story to it. And the story of Angel's Blues is someone who is transitioning out of their living body, but they're only halfway, and they've become an angel. They're sitting on a cloud looking down at earth and seeing lovers and passion and all this human stuff, but can't take part because they're no longer human. They're an angel now. So they have the blues. They're looking down at all the people in love and all that, and they're going, oh.
This might be a weird connection, but is that kind of part of life as well, where I'm already nostalgic about things I did a couple of weeks ago in a way. Is that human nature as well to kind of look back at the things you've done and going, oh, I wish I still could?
Yeah, I think that's pretty human nature, to never be exactly satisfied with what you have,
And then for you, as I mentioned in the beginning, you have such a storied career and such a interesting life that you've led, I suppose. What are the things that you hone in on most, or that you are most not? I don't want to say nostalgic, but that spring to mind for you when you look back.
Well, I think that people are always asking me, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do different? And my answer is always the same. It's always, I wouldn't change a thing.
Mm.
Because given the conditions and the questions I had to answer throughout the decades of my life, I think that the decisions I made were good. I wouldn't go back and try and change anything. I've made good decisions all along, I think.
Fair enough. And then one of those good decisions is now bringing out a solo record. Do you have any expectations in terms of playing live? And because now that the world is slowly opening up again and things seem possible, how do you look towards playing these songs live?
Oh, well, I'm just going to try and get as many in as I can. I mean, I think, for instance, a song like Missionary Man is really relevant to the world now. Mm. Just the whole idea of organized religion and everything becoming the religiosity of just the church running everything in America. And it's all pretty just, it's expected.
Mm.
Yeah.
What do you want people to take away from your songs? And I'm sure this has changed over the years and perhaps from one song to the next. But what do you want people to take away from the music that you make? And in this case, this particular album?
Yeah, well, I want them to hear great singing, great playing, and some new topics to think about. And yeah, I just hope it's slightly consciousness raising. Like even a song like Missionary Man could help in the culture,
Sure.
Help us look into our own mirror.
Do you remember when you first heard that song? Or well, not literally first, but kind of when it came to your attention?
When I heard it first? Yeah, back in the 1980s, probably when the Eurythmics version came out. And I liked the story of it. And it's been really great to make it our own with the gospel singers and Kenny Wayne Shepherd playing guitar and just making a great big mega church production out of it. I like that a lot.
And the first song of the album, Greed, which is also, as you mentioned, it's very, very relevant today, I suppose.
Yeah.
When did this kind of notion came into your mind? And was it anything particular that kind of forced this into you?
Oh boy, the last few years have been on the political scene in this country. It's been greed in capital letters, and with the corporations and the just the materialistic way that people live, and now it isn't only in America. Now it's with this war that's going on over where you are, close to where you are. War is greed. It's just reaching out for more, so I think that greed is really universal at this point. I think people they'll feel what it means and they'll get it,
Yeah, and I suppose as you mentioned, I think in the bio as well, it's not just corporations and politicians, but it's us ourselves. We can be very, very greedy in all kinds of aspects.
Absolutely, yeah. Just in the things we want for ourselves in our own lives, and the way we treat our partners and our children. It can be. I think that it's in the race, and I think that it's also in nature. I've got two dogs that are like the greediest things ever.
I was thinking about something else, and if you don't want to get into it, you don't have to. But if you think about the music industry, there's always been a lot of greed in there as well.
Oh
What
boy, yeah.
what have your experiences been with that, and how did the business side, or could you kind of keep the business side away from the creative side?
Yeah, I think it's very important to keep the creative process pure.
Mm,
And one thing that happens if you don't keep it pure, if you start to mix the creative and the business, is that you start listening to the record company,
mm,
for instance, who say, we don't hear a single, you should write something more like this, like what's on the radio or something. And that's got nothing to do with creativity. That's got everything to do with making money,
mm.
greed. So
Yeah.
it's always been a really difficult thing between the merchant and the artist.
Right, because one thing I found, and maybe you see this completely different, but one thing I found when they talk about kind of the somewhat of a decline commercially for Heart, I thought they were still doing well. I mean, not every album has to be number one, right? So it just feels so
Right.
strange that is kind of the barometer by which we measure these things.
Yeah, that is strange. And if an album comes out that isn't number one or even top 10, it's discounted as being bad work,
Mm.
or substandard somehow. So yeah, that's always been very frustrating.
Yeah, have there been albums or even songs that you think deserved more praise or deserved more attention in your back
Well,
catalog?
yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah. I think that the Desire Walks On album deserves more attention.
Mm,
Fanatic album does. Um, there have been lots of different projects we've done that couldn't stand the light of day when compared to the 80s Heart albums that went number one. That kind of number one syndrome kind of knocks everything else out of the park.
mm. Finally, then, and having lived all those things, do you now have any? I don't know if ambition is the right word, but any expectations for Forced Bliss? Do you have any desires in a way for it?
Well, like I've been doing this for so long that years and years ago, I gave up trying to predict what's going to succeed, because there's so much that goes into
Mm,
having a number one record or having a successful album. It's more than just the album itself. It's how committed the record company is to backing it. It's what you do live on stage, on tour, how you support it. It's very political in some ways, just like being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame
mm.
is, or getting a Grammy is. So to answer your question, I've given up trying to predict. But I just think I think Fierce Bliss is a really good record, and it's honest, it's authentic, and it sounds great. It's got great music on it, great stories. I hope people just dig it.
Mm.
And if it does well, then that's icing on the cake.
Last question then. When did the album title pop up? When did you?
Oh, well, I had lists and lists of potential titles, and nothing was good enough, and then finally I just thought one day, I thought of the word fierce, and then I thought, well, what's so fierce about it? And then I thought, well, because I love this so much, I love doing it. It's my bliss to actually to write and then record and all this and have it come out and perform live. So I just put the two things together.
Okay. Well, I think it's absolutely great that you still have that passion as strong as perhaps when you started out. That's really inspiring.
Well, thank you.
All right, Anne. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and I hope you have
Sure.
a lovely day.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.